Greetings. And this time I'm not going to publish a video, but rather an audio talk. Because I'd like to think of this as a kind of interval. Because the first series of the Visions episodes has now been published. All 6 episodes are online. And next week I'll be publishing the first episode of Series 2 in the Vision series. The Visions of Chris Bashé, Dark Night, Early Dawn. Before I do that, I thought it would be appropriate to have this interval where I'm kind of just looking at the visions from the first series approach to reality. Because I've found these visions quite profound and a lot to consider, very, very thought-provoking ideas. And I didn't want to leave them without perhaps a few comments. Now, for example, the first episode in the series, called A Whole New Design for Life, started to talk about a kind of framework or structure for inner development that was moving into manifestation ahead of us in time. And it's as if every detail of this structure, according to this vision, is pre-planned, but it's not in linear time. It supersedes our planetary laws of cause and effect. And the vision continues by stating that it appears that the Earth's layer of living beings is undergoing a kind of penetration of cosmic material, which is deliberate on the part of some higher agency, a governing force which the person having the vision felt that this force controls the ultimate destiny of the Earth and mankind. So the vision talked about how all organic life is being affected on this planet by this incoming force, this incoming framework or structure for inner development. And it's a kind of coded vibrationary incoming force, which is coded to produce precise results that will kind of supersede the old modes of development on this planet. And the way that this was described in the vision is a kind of what was called a subtle kind of surgery, the cutting away and removal of malformations, as they said, which is going to work out drastically in world events. So it's interesting here that we have this perspective, which I think is relevant at this time of darker world events, that rather than seeing it all from a negative point of view, what may be happening is a kind of response from physical events on this world to an incoming repatterning vibrational force, which is trying to cut away these accretions, these outmoded patterns that were from a previous time. And so perhaps we're seeing a kind of survival response to this incoming surgery. And we've been told that events that are happening in this physical world already exist in potential, but on a subtle level. They just need time to manifest or actualize upon the physical level. And in this kind of in-between time, before events which are already exist, before they become actualized in the physical, the tension of this incoming force. Now imagine it like you throw a stone into a pond of water. You see these ripple out, the water ripples, and then you throw a second stone in. Of course, if you throw the 2 stones close together, the 2 ripples will go out and then cross and interfere with each other. And it's as if we're seeing the ripples from the old order, the old mode on this planet, being affected by the interference of the new vibratory pattern coming in. And that interference is creating this state, or this period upon the planet for natural geophysical events that are happening, and also affecting human-made dramas of this kind of conflicting energetic interference period. So I think there's a lot to grasp there. And also, interestingly, in whole new design for life in the first episode. At the end, the vision talks about that there's a kind of certain kind of percentage or a certain number of beings of high development being born into human bodies at this time, which they state is, quote, to burn up or transmute at a vastly higher rate the effects created by the mass of men, which obstruct their own progression towards their own true destiny. Seeming to suggest that there are certain people being born now into human bodies and before now that are of a high development, and they are here to somehow transmute the energy of the planet into a higher rate, to help the overall effect of this vibrational pattern on the planet. How they do that is not said, but I think that's an interesting notion. And then the second episode, Evolutionary Possibilities, talked about a lot of our human potentials that are latent, such as our psychic perceptions, our clairvoyance, clairaudience, and other effects. That they're latent and they're dormant, but they're part of our faculties, and they're a part of what's possible through, for example, large areas of unused human brain. And in the vision, they talked about these faculties being perceived and how that we can move away from the limitations of certain unused portions of our brain to activate our psi faculties, our greater faculties. And also in that vision, the person said that they came to understand, which they could not believe at the time, that they were plugged in unknowingly to a group of souls who had made adverse growth, and this was affecting them. So here's a sense that perhaps there are certain souls and incarnated souls on this planet that have taken a choice or a path of adverse growth. And if we remain attached to them or in some way entangled with them or relating to them, that adverse growth may affect us also. And then in the third episode, Blue Krishna, it starts off by saying that in this vision, they saw this large stationary shape near the bedroom door, and that it created great fear. But then they realized that this figure was dead, and it had, quote, been detonated, rendered inactive by an intelligence that had all things under control. So the idea that perhaps there have been these fearful fearful influences that to a large degree have been rendered inactive on, let's say, a metaphysical level. And so we may see their shell, we may see the outer shell, which still gives us fear, but their power has been rendered inactive. And then the vision goes on to say that from this kind of inactive shell, there was an outpouring of supercharged kind of energy or atoms that they felt was radioactive. And these particles then entered this person and stepped up their own vibration, quote, forcing entry into the life stream, activating my brain. And then they had this vision of explosions. So there's a sense here that certain deactivation of certain energy forces, that energy, of course, is being utilized and passed on to perhaps energize and reactivate other parts and parts of us and parts of the planet. So there's a kind of transformation of this energy. It's not just left alone. And then, of course, I mean, there's a lot more material. I'm just going through it briefly. Of course, then the next one, part 4, was the Great Cycle, goes into a kind of vision of bliss by seeing that there's lesser cycles within greater cycles, each span of time containing many smaller cycles. And I think the notion of cycles is very relevant to the present time. A lot of talk about the planet going through a cycle within a larger cosmic cycle. And in this vision, the person talks about certain centers of natural energy in certain geophysical locations and countries are receiving energy at different times, and this energy is working through the planet. And also that each lesser cycle has its attribute or lesson or trend of development that has to be learnt or moved through in its time. But now they said that in the vision there was a feeling that these smaller cycles are synchronizing to a nadir or a point of a great cycle, making the current age of special significance. And they felt that this great cycle showed a preparation for the onset of an evolutionary leap into a completely new time track. And quote, those who had not risen to their evolutionary opportunities must commence again the eternal round. So a sense, of course, here, which has been talked about in other materials and traditions, about the cycles, you have to be able to kind of attach to or align or resonate with those cycles to go on that time track. So we have interesting things there. And of course then episode 5, the giant nexus, interestingly start to talk about some of the darker or damaged degenerate egos, which, quote, all occultly contaminated, dangerous, destructive and self-willed, and they adhere together through mutual attraction. So the idea again that there are certain souls or elements that have for some reason been contaminated, occultly contaminated through occult or metaphysical influences, and it's self-willed, so they attract these forces. Certain people attract these contaminated forces, and then through the principle of mutual attraction they kind of herd together. They attract themselves, so the dark aspects always cohere with other dark aspects. But that this energy coming in is trying to get rid of these dark aspects, these accretions. And it's said that this energy was destroying the shells, these energetic shells, not the soul, but the energetic shells that have been contaminated. And that's interesting. So it's kind of trying to clean off the toxic contaminations over the souls that are incarnated. And we may not recognize how some people have accumulated a lot of negative energy around them, and either they increase their own negativity, or they have an opportunity to allow this toxic contamination to be taken away from them. And so in this vision of the giant nexus is talking about how there's some work going on to take off these accretions that have been layer upon layer, like people have been putting these overcoats of negative accretions on them. And there's an interesting line here which I say, quote, the potent and charged mentalities composing the nexus exuded thought forms and desires received and ingested as food by the masses. So of course a lot of what's produced in this energetic nexus, what we may refer to as the energetic matrix across the planet, that we don't perhaps fully recognize that thought forms and desires are received and ingested as food by many people. And it's not just invisible thought forms and desires that we're unaware of, but of course this gets put out and amplified deliberately through the culture industry and the symbols and the the visual popular culture consumerist kind of food being put out, which we ingest as food, and that affects these accretions that we accumulate. And in the final one, which I think is a very powerful episode, Direct Intervention, talks also about these kind of a spider's web of dark occult energies that have kind of grown across the planet, and how this energy, this vibrational pattern coming in, this structure is cutting away these kind of spider's tentacles of this occult energy. And so perhaps again it gives another perspective to understand that perhaps what we're moving through at this time is this cutting away of all these negative modes and occult energies, which are causing this backlash, causing this kind of last gasp response. But if we focus on that last gasp response, we're focused on the negative aspects which are being taken away and being destroyed and that. So we should actually recognize that as a sign of a new kind of a resonant mode of operation coming into the planet. So that's a very brief summary, but I do feel that now all 6 episodes are out. They're also being published as audio files online in such places as Bandcamp and Spotify. So you can listen to it in your own time and put on your headphones, I would recommend, and try to, get your own feeling and response to these visions. But what I think is necessary is that I think it's necessary in our human cultures to recognize that, of course, we've been conditioned to consider life in an exterior way. We're always looking outwards, and so we are naturally have our kind of inbuilt limitations. And our human cultures, they don't provide us or don't, recognize the potentials that to see things on a cosmic, metaphysical, and mythical dimensions. Because to have those perspectives gives us tools, gives us a degree of resilience against the encroachment of physical events and the physical environment. So if we only individually and collectively perceive our existence within the 3 dimensions of physical matter, then we are effectively starving ourselves not only of greater meaning, the greater nutrients, but also of those inspirations and creative imagination that are necessary really for our continued evolutionary development and growth. Because we need those creative spurts. We need to utilize creative imagination and inspiration, because if we don't, then we're more vulnerable to fall under the sway or the delusion of materiality and its restricted, contained environment. And so we need the tools of perception to recognize that all existence is a kind of graded environment, an environment of graded perceptual comprehension. And if we don't strengthen our inner muscles, so to speak, our perceptive capacities will remain dormant. And then we won't have the inner discernment to be able to recognize subtle gradations of experience. We will just have, because we're conditioned from birth just to really recognize and react to, the cruder forms of stimuli, which are just based on an exterior mode of existence. We're almost completely blind to the more subtle manifestations and experiences that are available to us. It's as if our outer ears are accustomed to the high volume of shouts and shrieks going on, whilst our inner senses are numb to the sweet whisperings from the cosmos. So the psychic perceptions of humanity largely are stunted and remain in stunted growth, because we've not given true recognition and attention to such potentials and evolutionary possibilities. In fact, we've not been given the chance really to recognize it, because all our attention onto interior psychic metaphysical modes are closed down very quickly by the material existence, which almost for its own survival strategy wishes to close down humanity's psychic abilities and recognition of the metaphysical background of life, as I refer to it. And so we get closed down very quickly, and we're not given a chance to kind of activate those modes. But I think now perhaps we're given a cosmic push to activate those potentials within the human species. And so because of that, I wanted to put out some of these visions to kind of activate our own considerations and focus of attention. So that's the end of the first series of Visions 1, and shortly next week I'll be continuing by putting out Visions 2, and I invite you to join me and to join your own explorations into the potentials and possibilities of further human development and evolution. So let's continue upon this adventurous and inspired pathway. Until next time, cheers.